We're live.
Lovely, thank you very much. Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Combined Authority. We have quite a big agenda to get through today. First of all, going to apologies for absence. Just looking at my list here, we have apologies for absence from Councillor Jeffrey from Wakefield, but the Deputy Leader, Councillor Jack Hemingway, is in place of her this morning. Wave, Councillor Hemingway, so people know who you are. Thank you. And also we have Roger Marsh is absent today, but in his place we have Mark Roberts. Mark, would you like to indicate where you are? Thank you very much. And then also we have Councillor Harrand away, but Councillor James Baker, who's the Deputy Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, is here to as a guest. Councillor Baker, where are you? Just wave at me. We were there a minute ago. He is around, so he will be back on very shortly, I'm sure. And I believe, is that it for subs, Ruth?
Yes, that's it, Councillor Hinchcliffe, yes.
Thank you very much. So moving on to the rest of the agenda, declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests. Can I see any disclosures that need making? None indicated, thank you very much. Exclusion of the press and public, I don't believe there's any items that require that this morning.
No.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the meeting of the Combined Authority held on 25th of June, those are circulated. Has anyone got any questions or comments they want to make to those, or can we accept them as an accurate reflection of that meeting? Fine, well, I propose that we accept those as an accurate reflection of that meeting. Of those members, please show if you're happy with that. Thank you very much. It's carried. Moving on to the substantive items on the agenda today, which are I say, quite vast. So for decision, we have item 5, first of all, which is COVID-19 update. Now, everybody is a local authority leader in their own right, has been active in their own local authorities combating this health pandemic and the severe health impacts it's had on all the people we represent. In Bradford, obviously we have over 500 people who've died of COVID, and that's been a major tragedy for the city and for the people. There's also, of course, with COVID, the economic shocks that come with that. And we're anticipating as we move forward, as furlough comes to an end, that there will be more people made redundant. And that is obviously a massive concern for us. What we can't have is ongoing poverty as well as a health pandemic. So it is very much in the remit of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority to reflect and act on that, to make sure we're supporting businesses to keep going and stimulating the economy where we can. But what we do want is an economy which works for everybody. And therefore we need to be mindful of the inclusive growth ambitions we've also got. So there's a paper in the pack, but Brian, would you like to speak to this paper? Brian Archer is the Director of Economic Development for the Combined Authority. Brian, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. If I start with some of the challenges faced by our businesses across the region, I mean, it seems to be consistent that cash and cash flow levels is really impacting on businesses together with a combined uncertainty. There are some highlights, particularly around the amount of funding that the LEP and Combined Authority have been able to push with local authority partners into the region. £500 million worth of grants have been delivered to 35,000 firms, and a further £4.5 million has been delivered to 850 micro firms that initially were ineligible for the grant support. And just as one example of that, we recently launched a digital voucher scheme to enable businesses to trade online and secure a grant of up to £5,000. And in a few days, it was oversubscribed. So there's huge demand out there for finance and for access to cash. Other highlights, though, that I'd like to point out are the business growth applications. We're still seeing applications coming through from businesses that are in growth mode, particularly in the food and drink sector, where we've had over 40 applications. We're also still receiving inward investment inquiries. Just last week, we had an inquiry from a London-based cybersecurity firm, which looks very promising. And we completed the evaluation of the business growth programme, which delivered 9,000 jobs and supported over 15,000 businesses. The lowlights, as the chair outlined, were around employment. Now, obviously, in this region, we've got 344,000 people on furlough, up to 60,000 jobs at risk, and 130,000 people currently on universal credit. Now, there's been a range of measures announced by government and a number of measures that we're delivering at local level, which include the job retention bonus, which is a £1,000 incentive that's paid to employers to retain a furloughed worker. We've also seen the announcement of the Kickstart Scheme, which is a wages subsidy for young people aged 18 to 24 to keep them in employment with a 50% subsidy. We're also seeing the introduction of an incentive to retain apprentices, a £2,000 incentive to take on an apprentice, and a further £1,500 on top of that if they're over 25. And of course, we're going to see huge demand through the job centres, and again, government have responded by increasing the amount of funding available for careers advisors, but I still think it's not enough. Something like 32 million nationally to increase the number of careers advisors, and job centre staff have been doubled as well to mitigate some of the impact of that. On the transport side, we have been successful in securing 2.5 million to promote walking and cycling, and there is some increase in passenger levels. I think currently in the region we're operating at 40% of normal passenger levels. Obviously, face coverings are still mandatory, and I understand that up to 75% of bus services are operating at the moment. That's essentially it on business support side. Clearly, we've got the employment hub and the skills hub, so we're supporting businesses and individuals and matching them with vacancies as they arise. But clearly, the tsunami of people coming off furlough is going to hit around October, and we're making sure that we're mobilising all the resources, working with Job Centre Plus to make sure we can mitigate that as best we can with the resources that we've got. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So skills is something I'm particularly focused on. I want to make sure we do as much investment as we can in skills to retrain people so they can get jobs which are of good value and which put food on the table. So really important to have a focus on skills. But Councillor Groves, did you want to come in any of the transport elements? Obviously, the paper includes transport and how we are recovering from a transport point of view.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Although the numbers seem to continue to increase in terms of people travelling, I think it's about the survival of the transport system long term. We're obviously working with bus and rail operators to ensure that we are playing a part in that recovery, working with them on the ticketing and season tickets that the general public have questioned us about. We've obviously taken short-term actions to support people through this crisis and to the recovery. We've put all the measures into bus stations and transport hubs, and we've had to maintain the 6 million per month to support key workers and essential workers on the concessionary fares, and that obviously is a strain in terms of our financial situation. I think it's really important that we continue to, Councillor Blake and yourself, continue to have conversations with government. We do believe there will be some announcements on August the 4th around funding. However, my concern is for those people who do not have a car or do not travel by rail, and the bus is their only source of transport to get to work. We've got that part to play in that economy, and it's really crucial that we have funding to make sure that happens. As Brian said, we've got the 2.5 million. Hopefully we'll get another 10 million for active travel. Some of the schemes have been delivered across the districts and have been implemented. And we continue to deliver major capital programmes through the Transport Fund and Transforming Cities funds. So we're playing a really active part, not just in the short term, but in the medium and long term recovery on transport, but extremely challenging.
Thank you, Councillor Groves, and we'll be revisiting the subject of buses later in the agenda, which I'm sure you'll have more to say on. Councillor Pennington, you were indicating.
Thank you, Leader. It's a question really for Kim or Brian. I think I've read this right, that the rail funding is ending at the end of August, apart from the two that are centrally funded, the LNER and the Northern Rail. Can I ask what happens to the other people like TransPennine and Hull Trains from a funding prospect?
Is Dave Pearson? Dave, are you wanting to comment on this?
Yes, just to clarify, Chair. At the moment, every rail franchise company is under what they call an emergency management arrangement, and that extends until mid-September. We're awaiting a government announcement as to what the next stage of that is, but we're expecting an extension of that probably into 2021. And that applies to TransPennine, and it would apply to all of the rail operators. As Councillor Pennington points out, Northern and London North Eastern Railway are separate in one sense because they actually are under government management, whereas the other arrangements, like for TransPennine Express and the other operators, that's very much a temporary emergency contracting arrangement pending a longer term arrangement that we will probably begin to see the shape of as the year goes out.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Lee. Councillor Lee, sorry, I should have welcomed you to the meeting because I believe it's your first meeting today as one of the opposition members of the Combined Authority, replacing Councillor Hall, who ceased his term last year. So thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the meeting.
Thank you very much for that welcome, Chair. Appreciate it. Just a question on transport. Again, I know that we'll be talking about buses in more detail later, but I understand that something up to 2/3 of people say that in the longer term they're interested in working from home. There's certainly an appetite for that now post-COVID. So given the huge impact of COVID on public transport and bus patronage, do we think it's still reasonable to base our decision making on a previous target of doubling bus patronage in the foreseeable future? And if it's not a sensible target anymore, how does that affect any of the projects that are ongoing, and will we get value for money from them?
Thank you. It's a big discussion there, Councillor Lee. Of course, that impacts on our climate emergency agenda as well. So obviously our investment in transport is also to make sure that we can achieve our climate emergency ambitions, which are still real and which people still want us to achieve. Dave, did you want to come in on that technically, or?
I think clearly, as the paper later in the agenda points out, and the transport recovery paper that you have in front of you points out, we live in uncertain times around public transport, and so I think that's sort of well understood. And whilst Councillor Lee is correct that there's an indication coming back from the surveys that the Combined Authority and others have made, is that there probably are going to be fewer people commuting than we saw before the pandemic. I think we should also sort of identify the fact that, well, actually we kept a public transport service going throughout the deepest part of the lockdown, because there's still essential workers who need public transport to get to work. And since the lockdown started to ease in its various different forms, we've seen some recovery of people using public transport to get to work. So I think the picture is unknown, and I think it's fair to say office-based commuters are not in the network at the moment, and we'll need to monitor the coming months to see how that actually plays out.
Thank you, Dave. I think it's also worth saying, I've got Councillor Pandora coming next, but I think it's also worth saying that You know, Bradford is a key worker city, for example, and will always be reliant on public transport for that reason. People need to be able to get around. And our strength as a region is that we're well connected, but we need to improve that connectivity. I think that's all. West Yorkshire Mass Transit, for example, is a major programme for us that we need to achieve. So, Councillor Pandora, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, very quickly, Chair. I think Councillor Lee highlights a really important issue, something that will be, I'm sure, a topic as we move forward. Also, I don't want to say too many things at the moment because we've got an item on agenda item number 10, which actually directly links to how we can support our buses, our bus companies, if they are going to be any bus companies, and what our role is. So I think I'll leave the key debate for then, but I think this issue isn't going to go away. This is something that needs sorting out. You know, the more I see, the more I see the role of governments and local government increase, especially as we move forward, because this is going to be something that's going to be around for at least end of the year, if not longer. And we need to get a plan and a strategy on this. But I'll leave my main comments to agenda item number 10. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pandora. Indeed, it's a fast-moving environment. Councillor Galton, I have you indicating.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to follow up on Councillor Lee's point about how we need to reprioritise potentially our investment plans. What I would say is, instead of reprioritising, we should actually just be repositioning and thinking about how they projects that we have can have value added to them. So, for instance, you said yourself, Councillor, that we need buses to get around. A lot of our transport investment, however, is all about getting in and out of city centres. And actually, we could be re-evaluating and recognising the more complicated lives of people that aren't just commuters and actually get around the communities that they live in. And I think that's something where the potentially the single investment fund could be looked at in terms of making sure that we're valuing all of the local economy and not just city centre based activity through our public transport investment.
Thank you, Councillor Galton. We're in danger of moving on to item 8, which we're not there yet, on the single investment fund. So I won't address that point just yet, because otherwise the meeting will go into chaos to have that. But I'll just go to Councillor Groves, who was indicating just to respond to that. I believe, Councillor Groves, our current restraints are about the fact that government is paying bus companies direct. Is that correct?
It is, yeah, and we may come to a point where bus companies are handing routes back, and that would cause us financial difficulty because we would have to still subsidise those routes. There's lots of areas that just do not have the connectivity, and the patronage would grow if they were connected, such as employment zones, and I think the planning system's got something that we can look at in terms of connecting to housing development. Long term, we know that young people, the figures pre-COVID, when we got the fare right and we were hoping to launch a young people's deal in October, that we had a 31% increase in growth in that passenger market. So even though obviously COVID has had a massive impact, I think long term, if we get the connectivity strategy right, I don't think we've got any choice because people are too reliant on cars, and that modal shift has to come. However, our connectivity across the region is poor, and I think Councillor Galton also alluded to those socially necessary journeys where people are isolated in their homes, and in rural areas, and the services are very poor, and so they're reliant on cars. So we've got lots of work to do, but even though we're in challenging times, we've got to be optimistic and look to the future.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Groves. Councillor Blake, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for all the contributions around this. I have a call with one of the ministers today, and another one later in the week, just to pick up try and pick up the thinking of government around this. And obviously, there've been the very local, practical impacts of COVID on the system. But one of the things that's happened is that there's been a real delay to the publication of the Williams Review. All the issues about governance and really the future of franchising as a whole, particularly on rail in this instance. So there are a lot of question marks, but the call I've got today is really about progressing the Blake Jones review and making sure that government really do honour the commitment to put passengers at the heart of the decision making. So through Transport for the North, we're keeping up the pressure on all of the work that the Combined Authority has done over many months now, really as a result, in the first place, of the timetable situation, but obviously that's fed through into the recovery work as well. So a lot of work to be done, and actually a lot of focus on all of the issues around passenger confidence. And I think that's an area that we really still need to focus on. You know, it's the same with if you're talking to other sectors, you know, retail confidence, whether people will actually return in the way, or whether we're looking at you know, really new models of working. And obviously we don't yet fully know how long term the changes in behaviour actually are, in terms of choices that people are making at the moment with regard to how much time they want to continue to work from home, for example. So there's an awful lot in the mix, but just to let you know that through my role on Transport for the North, we are keeping a very close dialogue with government, and they're very keen to work with us, and particularly keen to work with us around mass transit, and particularly in the light of the manifesto commitment to actually address the issue of mass transit in Leeds, and of course with the work we've been doing now extending into West Yorkshire, that's something that we need to keep a real focus on to help us move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. So obviously this is a paper which shows how much work has already gone on, but how much work there is still to do. And regardless of the answers to some of these issues that have been outlined this morning, I think it does indicate there's going to have to be a huge public sector investment in our services nationally, but also regionally, going forward, to support the economy to grow and to recover as we hopefully get out of the COVID pandemic crisis and move into something which is more managing COVID. So the health elements of that are still present and are still a danger, as Councillor Blake says, to economic recovery. People need the confidence to be able to go out and participate in the economy for it to thrive and survive. So the paper is just for noting. We will note that paper. Everybody hopefully are happy with that. But we move on now to an extension of that discussion we're just having, really, which is item 6 on the agenda, which is COVID-19 recovery plans. West Yorkshire leaders have been leading a group of people from across the region on planning how we respond to the economic shock that we've had as a region in trying to deal with the pandemic. And I want to say thank you very much for all the work people have put in so far, not just leaders, but of course we've had business representative organisations on there, we've had the health service on there, we've had business leaders on, and some think tanks like the Joseph Rowntree Foundation as well, for example, who've been really valuable insight that they've given us as we've progressed through this. This plan is just the first draft. It's not the end result at all, of course, but I am mindful of the fact that government is now starting to put its own plans in place for further investment in recovery, which I believe will come in the spending review this autumn. So it's imperative that we do make sure we start to circulate this plan and talk about it with government as well, so they know what investment we need and what difference we can make, how we can be part of the plan to recover the economy, and what contribution West Yorkshire has to make on this agenda. We have still a lot of opportunity. We're a place which has a young population, which has a diverse activities in terms of industries, and some of our strengths are really quite outstanding in terms of the health field and digital. Obviously Channel 4 coming to Leeds is going to be a major opportunity. So this plan outlines our first draft. We're focusing on good jobs and resilient businesses, skills and training, and accelerated infrastructure, going on what we're discussing earlier about making sure we spend money to give us that infrastructure, but also to create jobs in building that infrastructure. So of course there are local plans that go with this. So and I know that Kirklees, I think, and Wakefield have already published their plans, which is great. The other local authorities are also working on their plans. So there's some strong local pillars on which this West Yorkshire plan is an overarching one which touches on all of us. But those strong local pillars are significant for this plan and need to be probably more reflected more strongly in it. And also transport, obviously West Yorkshire Transport Committee are working on the transport element of recovery for West Yorkshire, and health under Councillor Swift. The West Yorkshire Health Integrated Care System is looking at health recovery as well. So those are two important elements which are not explicitly mentioned in here because they're actually covered elsewhere in other committees. So just so everybody's mindful of that. Is this Alan? Alan, did you want to say anything else about that before I open up for questions, comments?
I'll just say a little more. Is that the plan, the economic recovery plan, sets out, in addition to the kind of the broad priorities which you've explained, it sets out in headline terms for specific propositions to government for investment, which are building on specific strengths within the region, because we think that there are a set of interventions which government are likely to want to make on a national level, and some of what we have put in the plan is essentially setting out for government what we think is required there. However, we also think that there are specific strengths which this region has where it can make a contribution to the national effort, and in particular building on strengths in health and health tech, health innovation. We've got big strengths in industry, in R&D, in universities and research. So there are a set of investment opportunities which we're setting out in here, which would create jobs as well as helping to improve health outcomes and supporting longer term population health. The second is that we've got big strengths around in digital, and so we're asking for some investment in that, and making sure as well that this isn't just about digital infrastructure, it's also about skills. So one of the things that has been highlighted by the current pandemic has been inequality in digital skills, where people who are in jobs which has enabled them to work from home digitally, if you don't have digital skills, then you are excluded from those sorts of roles. So there's a proposal there. There's a third one around entrepreneurship, so building on the work that some of the work that we've already done in Leeds and in the wider region on MIT REAP, but also with our wide range of excellent universities across the whole of the region, supporting startups, and also trying to reach out to communities to unlock entrepreneurship in all areas of our population. And then the last one, we've got a paper coming up later about zero carbon. We think that there are at least 70,000 jobs that potentially could be created through investment in a transition to net zero. The paper later on sets out a range of propositions to help the region become a net zero carbon economy, so that we can tackle the climate emergency. There are a range of infrastructure opportunities in there. So for instance, retrofitting buildings and so on, which could create jobs. And so there's a large investment ask in here as well. And then the other point just to say is that this is the economic recovery plan. There is also attached to this paper the transport recovery plan, and both of these being presented for endorsement as drafts today.
Thank you very much. I think obviously as leaders we're quite keen to see a cultural element in there as well, given our strong cultural infrastructure across the districts and across the region. That is another element that we need weaving in. There is a cultural framework that has been developed in the Combined Authority, and as that's nearly coming to completion, it's an opportunity to stitch that in as well. So I think obviously it's such an important part of our economic recovery to make sure that the culture is well supported in our region. So any questions, comments on any of that? Councillor Hemingway.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I fully support your comments regarding the culture sector. I think that is something that is obviously a concern. It's been hit particularly hard by COVID. And in Wakefield, we've got a strong cultural sector. Leads across the region, it's so important to get that right. I think just looking at the key asks, I know this is something quite close to your heart, Chair, as well, in terms of skills. In Wakefield, our recovery plan is focused heavily on skills and making intervention to boost the skills of citizens. If we are looking to reshape the economy fundamentally and take this as a chance to reset, then I think the greater focus on skills is essential both locally and at combined authority level.
Absolutely, very important. And I think when we go forward, we're talking about devolution. I think there's an opportunity there for Gainshare to be used to support our skills training. I do believe that it's important for people, no matter where they are in life, to be able to have easy access to skills and training to get the job they need. And that holds us back as an economy, not having that fluidity in the skills sector. So I think, as an aside, I think our further education sector also needs funding, actually, because they've been particularly badly hit over this last few months, notwithstanding they weren't in a great financial shape beforehand. Anybody else indicating on this? Mark Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Just a sort of comment from a business perspective. I think the size of the impact of COVID is obviously huge. The three scenarios talk about 10 to 22% of GVA and 30 to 58,000 jobs. And I think there is so much work going on as summarised in these papers. But I guess what's unclear to me in aggregate is whether the recovery plans that are presented here are actually bold enough and are actually ambitious enough for the job we want to do. I think a specific point on entrepreneurship, businesses big and small obviously have such a big part to play. And I think, as the paper highlights, the work from MIT REAP in encouraging this climate of innovation and entrepreneurship in our region is vital. And I think, as an entrepreneur, I'd like nothing more than for entrepreneurship, to have a revolution in our region. But I do fear that the asks in the paper, at circa sort of 60 million, which sounds a lot, but when you look at the sort of specifics that could be delivered, I do wonder whether we potentially miss an opportunity to go further. And I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Mark. I mean, Alan, obviously we've got, I think it's £500 million, isn't it, we're asking for from government, which I was asked over the weekend, is that too much? And I said, no, it isn't, because obviously we have ambition. We can always use more, Alan.
There's £500 million in those specific asks. The total asks across the piece in some of the other things total 1.1 billion. But as you've said, this is effectively a first mature draft and give us an opportunity to enter into conversations with government over the next couple of months as we lead up to the spending review. So we would look to develop these further. I do think that we need to be mindful of what government is likely to want to do nationally. So we should focus on asking for specific regional investments in those things where we think they're likely to want to make an investment that is regional, whereas there are probably quite a lot of things which we think are good ideas, but we'd effectively be shaping. It would be trying to shape national policy, hence why we've tried to focus on those specific asks. But yeah, for sure we can work on developing them further to try and increase the total amount of investment that we look to get. The other thing, of course, that we can bear in mind is that we have devolution coming, and some of what the CA might like to spend funding on through that may be shaped by the new world that we're now in.
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Gorton, I can see you indicate, but is that an old blue hand that you've got up there? Is it a new hand?
No, it's an old hand, sorry.
It's an old hand, okay.
I'll take it down.
Okay, fine, thank you very much. Anything else on this item? Obviously, I say it's work in progress. No, so I think what you've heard there, Alan, is are we making sure that our entrepreneurship investment is significant enough? Culture is something which is important to all of us and therefore needs weaving in. And we want to make sure that the plans that we have in place are reflective of the local plans that we have at a local authority level. and are aggregating the strength that we have there to show to government. We do believe that we have something to offer here, and that the investment they make will give them a return on the investment and give them more besides. So we can contribute significantly to UK PLC if they work with us as an active partner to deliver the plans that we've outlined here, but still more work to do. And as we said in the previous item, it's a fast-moving environment, so we need to keep this as a flexible plan that can be attuned should circumstances change again. So with that, then I see we have just to say we've provided comments and endorsement, and we want to see further development as the impacts of the situation become clearer. So with that, I think we just note the report and thank you for all the work that's gone on it, and look forward to seeing a future iteration and hopefully get into active dialogue around it with government as they seek to place their investment in regions which can give them that return that they're looking for. Lovely, thank you very much. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is devolution. And I was very pleased to see on here that we do actually have the highest number of responses to our devolution consultation that have happened for any consultation that's gone on before, I understand, Alan. So if you want to just outline some of the numbers for us, for comments and questions.
Yeah, so we undertook an 8-week consultation, which is part of the legislative process leading towards the order, which is the piece of legislation that Parliament will pass to create the Mayoral Combined Authority and seal the deal, as it were. That consultation finished a week ago yesterday, and we've had over 4,500 responses. The previous highest number of responses to an English devolution consultation is 1,350 there or thereabouts. So we have more than trebled the number of responses that have previously been received, and this is it shows the level of interest in the consultation. We are analysing the responses at the moment. We've received a lot of responses from members of the public, but also responses from various organisations that the CA works with as well, and we're looking at those, and we'll be able to bring forward more detailed results at some point in the near future. And of course, the next step will be each constituent council of the CA and the CA agreeing to submit a summary of the consultation responses and any changes that it wishes to make to the order in early September. So there'll be a series of papers that come to councils and the CA in early September, and then the summary of the consultation responses will be submitted to government.
Thank you. And did you also want to outline there's other recommendations on this paper? Do you want to just go through those at this?
Yes. So the rest of the paper gives you a summary of progress so far. So it sets out the series of work streams that we have got in place, which we've been working through with local authority partners. The other two things that the paper asks for is agreeing to join the M9 group of other mayoral combined authorities. So to explain this, the other mayoral combined authorities across the country have a group called the M9, for which there is a subscription fee of £25,000, which and we have been invited to join that. As part of the deal, you may recall that there was a commitment from government for us to be treated as an MCA from the date of the deal, and we've seen that come through with things like being given access to the MCA Brownfield Fund, which was announced a few weeks ago. So this is effectively the CA committing from our side as well that we're joining that group of M9, which then presumably becomes M10. So it's asking for approval for that. And then the last thing is that the consultation had in it a proposal for the PCC functions to come into the MCA. The plan originally was that it would be from 2024, but with the delay to the local elections and the Police and Crime Commissioner elections in May due to COVID, there's now an opportunity for that transfer to happen by next May, subject to feasibility. We are currently working through that, and this paper is asking the CA to endorse that position that we pursue a potential transfer by May 2021.
Thank you, Alan. So certainly, can I just congratulate officers, first of all, on getting such a high response to the devolution consultation, because that was something we as West Yorkshire leaders were particularly concerned about. Obviously, going into COVID, would there be adequate opportunity for people to find out what was going on? I think we've shown that we've done even better than we anticipated. So thank you very much for all the communication that's gone on that, and to make sure we're fully engaged with people, whether that's been online, with social media, etc. So we've used all avenues available to us. So I'm really pleased at that response. And let's just wait to see what people have to say. So any more questions or comments on the progress to date? Councillor Pennington.
Thank you, Leader. Just two small points. Maybe I'm being overly suspicious here, but it does say in the paperwork that the CA can adapt to any future organisational changes. Now, we all know what the big ones are. Are there any anticipated smaller ones? That's my first question. And the second question is quite a simple one, just to clear it up. This police air service, where's it based? Or do they have two bases? Is there one in London and one somewhere around Wakefield?
My understanding is they house it in West Yorkshire, the National Police Air Service, but Alan will be able to tell us more accurately. Alan? Yeah,
so the National Police Air Service has a number of bases across the country, including in Devon and Cornwall and in London. The issue is that it is governed out of the West Yorkshire PCC's office and West Yorkshire Police. So the National Police Air Service personnel are employed by West Yorkshire Police. The assets are owned by the West Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner, but the helicopters, the planes, the bases, etc., are spread over the country. It's a model called the lead force model, which is where a police force takes responsibility on behalf of everybody else, of all the other forces across the country, for running a particular service.
Thank you for that. Very clear.
And Alan, did you just want to come on back on Councillor Pennington's point? Did you want a clarification on that line in the paper about flexibilities?
Yeah, so there are a number of with the additional functions that are coming to the region. There is a need for us to look at what changes need to be made internally to the CA. We are working through that with councils at the moment to establish what future relationship looks like, where capacity might be, ensuring that collectively between the MCA and all the councils we have the collective capacity and capability to reap the benefits of the devolution deal. So there are things like I'll take Transforming Cities Fund as one. The Transforming Cities Fund has clearly led to a need for us to increase capacity within the CA and within councils in order to deliver that investment. There may be other funding streams that, as they come through, require us to spend an amount of the money on capacity within the CA and councils to ensure that investment can actually be delivered.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. I mean, certainly it's been, I've got Councillor Lee next, but just certainly it's been brilliant to see the brownfield money coming our way for investment, because that's obviously come as part of the devolution deal. We're already seeing success and more investment coming to our region because of that devolution deal. So I'm particularly pleased to see those signs coming from government. Councillor Lee, did you have something to say?
Thank you, Chair. It's just about the M9 group becoming the M10 group. Clearly, M10 would be a very powerful lobbying body, which would bring all of the mayors together to lobby for things. But I'm just questioning that devolution is good, and we want to get this devolved situation and a mayor elected that can represent the wishes and desires of West Yorkshire in this area. And so is it the right thing to do from the outset, stepping into a larger group, you know, if devolution's good, we've got it. So then we're now proposing to step up a level for, you know, another layer of some kind of bureaucratic process. So I'm just questioning that. We don't want surely our mayor to be influenced overly by other people's objectives. We want him to be working with our objectives absolutely at heart.
So thank you, Councillor. I think you may not misconstrued how Alan presented that item. So it's not a decision-making body, isn't the M10 at all? It is just a network. It's a network of mayors. So it's not. They're not going to make us do anything we don't want to do as West Yorkshire. It is just it's like the MP11, which is the LEC chair is on the MP11. In fact, chairs the MP11. Roger Marsh. It's a similar thing, but just for mayors. So it's not quite as significant, perhaps, as you're indicating there. Councillor Blake.
I think it's probably closer to put it in the context of the networking groups of council, so core cities and key cities. It's more of that. So then those groupings of areas that have similar issues that they're facing can come together, share best practice, and then when appropriate, put us a united voice forward to government, which is more powerful. But it's I think it's more in that line than anything else. I don't see it as being sinister at all.
No, that's a good analogy, actually, Councillor Blake. Thank you for that. Councillor Pandor. You're on silent, Councillor Pandor.
Sorry, I think all valid points, but I think the key for us really is how we get the maximum impact and benefit from any M10, M11, M12, because there's a devolution white paper that's actually being spearheaded by Minister Simon Clark, which will actually create more combined authorities. And I think what we need to do is make sure that we carry the right influence and make sure that decision makers actually know that we a massive city region, and also how we can then make sure that our constituent authorities can get the maximum benefit out of that. So it's all positive, but at the same time we need to make sure that our voice is heard and counted and carries. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, for a long time, because we haven't had a devolution deal, we've been left out of a lot of these conversations, and it's great now that we're being inside the conversation and we can have the arguments, get the investment that we need, and I think that's a really significant step forward. So thank you for that opportunity to clarify that, Councillor Lee. Any more questions or comments? No. Well, with that then, just the recommendations. That we make notes of the progress made to date. We join the M9 and endorse proposals to pursue a transfer of the PCC's office by May 2021. Can I see a show of hands for that, please? All those in favour, please show. Thank you. I think that is carried. Thank you. And then with that, then we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the single investment fund. Now, this is something we've already alluded to earlier in the meeting and talked about in terms of this is the money that we get to spend through devolution. And this is the workings through of how we start to decide how that money is spent, what the priorities are, and how we make sure it's a fair distribution of spending across our region and across the areas that we think are important. So with that, is this Angela? Would you like to present on this item? Angela Taylor, who's the Director of Corporate.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yes, the paper does, as you say, bring together some of the items we've just been talking about before, because this is the sort of emerging thoughts on the principles of how we will operate the funding that we have got. So the gain share and other funding all go to what we are investment fund, and that rather than being driven by only being able to deliver certain projects because that's the funding we have received and it's ring fenced to that type of project, This starts to give us the freedom to actually determine the interventions that we want for the region, and then apply the funding as best fits those priorities. So the gain share is unring fenced. It does have to be invested wisely across the region. We do have to be able to demonstrate that we are using it to build the economy of the region, but it is our call where that money goes. And this is just setting out in summarised in paragraph 2.4 some of the principles of how we're approaching this. So in effect, we put all the money together, and separately you have a process whereby you agree for the region through the Combined Authority the strategies and policies that then give rise to the interventions that you want to undertake. We then use the money as agilely as we can to deliver against those priorities. We are able to change tack if we need to, because it is our call where the money goes. It is not about delivering an agreed project with an agreed funding stream against it. It clearly is absolutely critical we have the right project, and as we've already noticed through the other items, the world around us is uncertain and changing. But through for example, the recovery plans, we are starting to identify the types of areas we think should be prioritised, and we are looking now to bring together that strategic prioritisation process under what we're calling the strategic economic framework. So everything will be housed under that strategic economic framework, bringing all the different policies together. There is a task for us to identify then how you can evaluate and prioritise from what will be quite wide and varied policy areas, but that will then come back to yourselves to make the decisions about where you want to see the money spent. So the report here is asking for endorsement to the direction of travel for this, as set out in the appendix and summarised in 2.4. I think to note that then this gives us a real ability to focus on delivery of projects rather than just chase the funding all the time. However, it will be absolutely critical to make sure we do keep an eye out for additional funding that can be used to supplement what we already have. And those opportunities for co-investment with local partners, other bodies will be explored as well. I don't know if Alan wants to add anything on the strategic economic framework, or any other questions from members.
Alan, did you want to say anything?
Well, only very briefly. I think Angela has covered the vast majority of it. It's to say that the strategic economic framework is an evolution of the strategic economic plan which we've previously had in place, although there is a need to update that overarching strategy to take account of various things that have happened over the last year or two. The biggest ones probably being, firstly, the current pandemic, where there is a need for us to adapt what we're doing to take account of that. And as discussed, we've got two very substantial recovery plans which set out a range of objectives over the next couple of years, and that needs reflecting in there. So that's one of the reasons why we need to kind of republish and set out our new strategic economic framework. The second big thing is the declaration of the climate emergency and the target for net zero carbon, which has not, because of when it has been declared, some of the existing policies and strategies don't have it embedded in it, and those need to be revised. So we will be bringing back to you in September a draft of the strategic economic framework for your comment and approval. Our current thinking is that it would be based around the four key objectives that have been set for the CA around boosting productivity, delivering 21st century transport, tackling the climate emergency, and enabling inclusive growth. And as the paper sets out, there are a range of pipelines that already exist across a range of our areas, and those range from delivery of infrastructure projects around flooding and transport and housing, for instance, but also programs on skills and business support. There will then be some decisions to be taken about what is prioritized, and from there we will work out how to fund it. So with that's all I would add to what Angela said. One of the key things with all all of this will be quantifying the inputs, the necessary inputs, the outputs and the outcomes for all our programs and policies, so that we are clear about what difference it is going to make for people, so that you are able both to take good decisions in the first place, but then also so that we can adapt what we're doing depending on what the evaluated effectiveness of what we're doing. So I'll stop there and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I mean, as leaders, having spent 10 years doing without money and making money go an awful long way, it's great to have the opportunity to spend some money on the economic priorities. But as you say, it's important, therefore, that we make sure that is good value for money. And that's what we as leaders have been trained to do, actually, over the last few years. So we want to make sure that every penny is well spent and well used. So I've got Councillor, I think it's Councillor Galton. Is that a new blue hand, Councillor Galton? And I've also got Councillor Pennington. So Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. Well, some members on here aren't used to being in administration, but we are used to being opposition leaders and offering challenge. And one of the things I couldn't identify in this paper was how we would effectively make sure that the decision making that was around this was more accountable and was more performance orientated. So I'll look forward to that being clarified in September's paper. But another area that was also missed out quite significantly was there's going to be an elected mayor, and it didn't seem to identify any role at all for that mayor, who is going to be having a campaign which will, I assume, include all the priorities that those candidates think are important and will be hoping to implement. And they don't seem to be included here in any of the decision making to show where they would have any influence, any prioritization ability, or indeed in terms of how they would be able to interfere with the process which is being developed here. So could somebody articulate that for me?
Yeah, I think Councillor Galton, those have been in previous papers. In fact, that's like governance things. So how scrutiny works and what the powers of the elected mayor, I think were in previous papers. But I dare say that'll be coming back again in September. Alan, would you like to just comment on those questions?
Yeah, certainly. So on the point about kind of quantification, evaluation, assessment, etc., that is something that we are still working through, how best to do it. It's not straightforward, but one thing that is that I think is clear is when you have a range of outcomes that you're trying to achieve, which are often competing. So there's a balance to be struck. It will be necessary for us to come up with a system for making decisions which doesn't just look at kind of simple what's the impact on the economy, but also takes into account the other objectives around narrowing gaps, reducing inequalities, reducing carbon, etc., so that there's a rounded picture given of the impact of any intervention. The point about the mayor, clearly the mayor will have a manifesto and things that they will be looking to achieve. We will have to adapt we'll have to adapt this to take that into account. There is, as Councillor Hinchcliffe said, a detailed mechanism for taking decisions about budgets, where essentially the budget of the CA has to be agreed by the mayor, and the mayor's budget has to be agreed by the CA. So the mayor and the CA have to collaborate on their overall on their overall financial decision making. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much as in other recent areas in terms of devolution and how it all works between the mayor and leaders and the combined authority. And I think it's fair to say, something you didn't touch on there, Alan, but given if the work of the combined authority expands, scrutiny will also expand. So I think that's what Councillor Galton was wanting to make sure, that obviously opposition councillors, oh no, it doesn't want to look at it, but I would have thought that I, as a leader, would want to make sure opposition councillors have adequate oversight about what the decisions are being made. Councillor Pennington.
Thank you again. Just a question for Angela here. Do we have any idea of the estimated value of the gain share?
We have the 38 million a year figure, which is split 75% revenue and 25% capital. That's subject to 5-yearly reviews to ensure that we have invested it in accordance with the principles we set out. So that is part of devolution. Once we have the order, then that money is unlocked for us for the next 30 years.
And we may not have said it before, but I think we have. That it is actually the best devolution deal that's been negotiated in the country.
Thank you.
So we're pleased that all more is always appreciated. So okay. So with that, I don't see anybody else indicating. We have on there. Let me just scroll up to my recommendations. We have on there that we consider and agree the approach set out and supporting a strategic economic framework for the CA as part of the devolution deal. So is everybody happy with that? Can I see those in favour? Please show your hands. People waving at me. Thank you very much. Lovely. Thank you. That is carried. Now then, moving on to the next item, which is capital spending, which is item number 9, which is something that Councillor Jeffrey, as chair of that committee, would normally present upon, but of course, I'm afraid she's absent today. But with that, Director of Delivery, Melanie Corcoran, would you like to present on this item instead?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So today we have 5 projects for consideration. They have a combined total value of just under 19 million when fully approved, and we're hoping to unlock 3.276 million today across the schemes so that they can continue to develop the schemes. So the first one is West Yorkshire Mass Transit. So we were talking earlier about if we could unlock further funding, because we are an MCA now, and this is the first amount of funding that hopefully we'll be able to unlock for mass transit. So the proposal here is that we release 2 million from the West Yorkshire Plus Transport Fund through the transformation pot, so that we can then work up a strategic outline case which looks at route options and also the mode of travel options as well. And then hopefully we will secure some funding from the government's 4.2 billion pot for mass transit that we will be able to bid into between 2022 and 27. So we need to start the ball rolling now so that we can develop our strategic outline case, and then, as I say, hopefully secure some alternative funding to actually do the design works and then deliver the project. The second one is A64 Bus Priority Park and Ride. So this one was part of our Transforming Cities Fund proposal. So this is looking at approving the strategic outline case so that the project can start working on the outline business case. The third one is an internal integrated corporate systems project for our finance and HR within the Combined Authority. The next one is to look at a strategic transport model for Bradford. So all of our district partners are working on strategic transport models, and this is the proposal that's come forward from Bradford for consideration. And then the final scheme is the Leeds City Centre cycle connectivity, and this is looking at 6 cycling infrastructure schemes as part of the access improvement package that again was part of the Transforming Cities bid. So they are the 5 schemes that were considered by the Investment Committee on the 8th of July, and they are recommending approval for those. We've also noted in paragraph 3.4 other schemes that are progressing where you delegated those decisions to Investment Committee. And then finally, just to pick up on the pothole funding, DFT award and allocation to the Combined Authority, and this is then issued to our Highways Authority partners by formula. And basically the numbers have changed because DFT are awarding the pothole fund and also the challenge funding through to us, which then will be passed on to our partners. So there's a recommendation to accept the funding and allocate that out to the district based on the formula.
That's probably a very easy decision to make, which is to accept funding and give it to local authorities. I think that's a great decision to make. I just obviously it's worth saying that these papers have been through West Yorkshire Investment Committee and have been scrutinised and negotiated and discussed at length, I'm sure. So this is for us to look at them a second time. But is there anybody got any comments or questions? I've got Stuart. Is that an old blue hand or a new blue hand? New. It's a new one. Councillor Gold.
It's a new and it's a short question. Following on from previous comments that have been made and the discussion we've just had about the single investment fund, can we identify a decision where the Transport Committee actually decided to defund something?
Yeah, do you want me to come back in, Chair?
Yes, please, yeah.
Yeah, if we decide to not fund anything or not proceed past a certain decision point, we will make that clear in the papers. And certainly when we come to look at some of our pipeline development work, we might do the strategic outline case or the outline business case. And then either there isn't suitable funding available at this time, or we may decide to pause the scheme. So we do have some of those that come through, and we'll make that very clear in the papers when they come through.
So there's lots of work that goes on behind these papers, Councillor Galton, and they come to the committee when there's a decision to be made. Councillor Lee, I can see you indicating. So, Councillor Lee, you're on silent. There you go. I can hear you now.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've already mentioned this earlier. Are we absolutely sure that either or all of the projects that we are about to approve are still relevant given the COVID situation? And if these projects were worked on prior to February, March this year, assumptions will have been made which are definitely no longer apposite. So before we approve anything, can we be assured that the payoffs and the benefits of the various projects will still apply? And if that's not the case, I'm sure we'd be able to use the money on projects that would apply. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I mean, I think just answering for leaders, what we've seen over the years is that we have to remain flexible with these priorities and the spending priorities. Obviously, climate emergency is another priority that's come through for us in recent years, and therefore everything we do has had to reevaluate it against that as well. So we remain flexible on these decisions to make sure that they're getting absolutely best value for money. But Melanie, would you like to just give that reassurance there that Councillor Lee is looking
Yeah,
for?
I mean, we are considering the current situation, and we talked about public transport and public transport infrastructure earlier. So yes, we do have aspirations to increase the patronage on public transport. And while it might take longer to recover the numbers, there is still a desire to have that infrastructure in place, because it's a longer term investment. It's not just for the immediate term. And then I think there's actually an example here of the cycling access scheme in Leeds City Centre, which has actually been brought forward quicker because they're able to use some of the active travel funding as well to look at some segregation as well. So because of the increase in walking and cycling at the moment in the current time, it's even more important that we bring forward schemes like this, because they're reacting to the immediate needs as well as providing longer term infrastructure.
I'm not following my own rule there. I'll mute myself. Any more comments or questions on that item? Yes, Councillor Pandora.
Yeah, we asked a similar question to what Councillor Stephen Lee asked regarding our investment plan back in Kirklees. We sort of thought long and hard, and I think the same applies to the Combined Authority as well, and probably with organisations. That what's happened what's happened internationally and nationally and locally since March, that was a complete shock to the whole system. And whatever measures we are putting in place, we're planning for complete unknown. Nobody would have predicted what was going to happen. So the short-term measures that have been put in place, and a lot of this is coming from national government, which is completely endorsed. One of the things that we actually reinforce that we have to carry on with our investment plan. We have to carry on with our medium to long-term strategy, because a lot of thought has gone into there. What we can't afford to do is basically start rethinking at the expense of all the thinking that has taken place. And one of the things I'm picking up from government is we have to get back to normal as fast as we can. And that's why I think what the government is saying in terms of the recovery and how we support government in terms of whatever guidance and plans come out from a national level and the powers that have been devolved at a local authority level, they need to work hand in glove. But we do need to actually take opportunity, because if we take a long time in terms of reviewing our plans, then we'll miss an opportunity. The government's up for it. They invest in billions. We need to take opportunity on that and basically kickstart, restart, recover, rebound, and come back even stronger. And I think, I'm a glass half full person. We have got everything going for us. We know where the issues were before. The evidence is now coming forward in terms of inequalities that exist in our community, in terms of poverty, in terms of deprivation. So the recovery plan is excellent. We can build on that, and we've got the investment there. We've got the infrastructure there, and hopefully come May, we'll have a mayor who's directly accountable to us and everybody else. And we need to basically make sure that we actually get on the front foot very, very quickly, because there will be other funding announcements, I'm hoping, in autumn, so that we can actually, get stuff not just in the pipeline, but get them actually through the door and start to deliver. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pondo. Certainly, government is looking to combined authorities to accelerate our capital projects expenditure, aren't they? Because obviously it's going to be part of the recovery of the economy, and we have a large role to play in that. So absolutely need to be right schemes, but we need to get on with those schemes very quickly as well. Councillor Groves, you were indicating there just before I close this item.
I think just to say, when I've sat in investment committee, that West Yorkshire Combined Authority have basically said on a number of occasions that they were putting a carbon lens on all schemes to relook at schemes and also rebalance the budget. But just obviously on mass transit that I've been working on for 2 years with a team, it's a golden opportunity. But if we don't have that business case ready and have those 5 sort of route options, and the districts have been engaging with us, then we won't level up the economy across West Yorkshire. So really important that we get this work done.
Thank you very much. So with that then, we've got the capital approvals in front of us that have already gone through the investment committee. I'd like to propose we accept those. Can I see all those in favour, please show? Thank you, that is carried. So thank you very much for that. Now we're moving on to the next item, item 10 on the agenda, which is future bus options. Obviously, this is something we referred to earlier in the meeting. Councillor Groves, would you like to start us off on this?
Thank you, Chair. The paper outlines the work that we have been progressing through West Yorkshire Combined Authority on bus options going forward. Probably more crucial than ever. Just obviously, we've just spoken about the mass transit system, but we don't have that type of system yet, and we do need a solution going forward to make sure that our economy is served well, that the public transport system is something that people want. They want an affordable and reliable transport system. The Secretary of State last year did allude to us applying for franchise powers. We didn't have that deal at the time. And this is a small amount in terms of what we would need to do for other options. Manchester has spent 660,000 on consultation. Then you need a 78 million initial costs to set up, with 22.7 million per year if you're going to go down that route. What we're looking at, and I think what we've got a golden opportunity to do, because we haven't got the tram system, is government knows that the bus model is broken and it needs to be realigned so that actually it can serve the whole of the country. They're looking at putting a national policy in October. I think we've got the opportunity to work on what a model should look like through working with our partners, but also think about those socially isolated routes that actually and rural communities that are not served well, as well as our employment and economic housing sites that will be opening up across the districts. I think it's fair to say that actually we know that the bus operators financially this is a challenging time for them, and we've seen the news on many occasions around First being in the press and their financial problems. We basically need to do short term with the deficit that we've got now within the network, but long term I think it's fair that even the industry is thinking about the things that we've discussed before, and what does the West Yorkshire public transport pound look like, and that operators actually, to keep financially stable, will have to think about transport going forward and how that's broadened out. And I think we've discussed, leaders have discussed around how much they spend on adult and social care. So there's a big piece of work on transport going on, not just short term, but medium and long term, and what that looks like. So this sets out the options and the work we need to do to understand legally what we need to do more of, to make sure that if there are any opportunities that come up, that we're ready as a combined authority.
Thank you, Councillor Groves. Certainly, when it comes to buses, we know that the model is broken, and that therefore this money to spend on looking at different options is very welcome. Councillor Blake, this is obviously an area that you lead on for us on transport as well nationally. Would you like to make any comments at this stage?
Just to reinforce Councillor Groves' comments, Chair, absolutely that the feeling that we've expressed on many occasions through this forum is that the bus model is broken. It isn't serving the needs of the travelling public. I think that's the really important message to get across. Obviously we are getting more and more experience with failing franchises on the rail network, and obviously gaining experience from that, and waiting for government to actually make some announcements about their future plans for franchising. This is an opportunity for us to look at the next steps. And obviously we're looking at other authorities who have been slightly ahead of us going down this route, and coming out of legal contracts is a very complex process, and we need to make sure that we move forward step by step, clearly mindful of a very difficult time for public transport at the moment. But I welcome the recommendations, and I hope we can all support it.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. I mean, certainly the reason obviously we're a bit behind others is because we've not had a Mayoral devolution deal, but now that's coming around the corner. That gives us more options. So this work is really valuable in getting us to the right stage by May next year. Councillor de Gorn.
Yes, it was just, I can see on paragraph 2.15, there's reference to several different options. I take it at this stage you're exploring all of those in terms of looking at what is going to be most appropriate, as you said, learning from other councils. One of the concerns I have is the effect of the pandemic has been to delay the implementation of a clean air zone. And I'm conscious, as Councillor Groves mentioned, whilst Leeds doesn't have a tram system, it does have at least an indicative clean air zone, which is following the government model of a charging zone. I'm just wondering if that potentially is a sort of a win-win solution to providing funding for public transport, if at the same time as removing polluting cars, that could be contributing towards the cost of an alternative, a better public transport system for people who are discouraged from using their cars by that charging zone.
I think that's more a Leeds question than a combined authority question. I think Councillor Blake, would you like to come back on that?
Only to say that we're dependent on government for where we are with the whole of this programme. Obviously, they delayed the programme because they didn't get the technology ready on time, and we're waiting for announcements of what they plan. But buses are part of that plan. But obviously, in terms of a funding source, the objective is that nobody has to pay the charge because all of the vehicles coming through will be clean. So in terms of a sustainable model, then that obviously has its own implications.
I must admit, I'm thinking more in the short term, that given the difficulties with public transport and people being discouraged from using it and therefore choosing their car, it is one way of, or it would be, if it was brought in fairly quickly, one way of encouraging that shift from car to public transport.
Okay, as I say, we're awaiting government announcements on the next step, so we'll have a look at it then. But I think that's quite a complex proposal, actually, to be fair.
So even with devolution, we don't yet have all the powers we'd like, Councillor de Gorn. I've got Councillor Galton and Councillor Shabir Pandora indicating. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. The first thing is page 200, 2.16, and it's been referred to, about how we need to spend more money on, because we don't have the in-house skill set. I would have thought, as the major transport organising body in the region, we would have the experience to know what we're talking about. So it'd be interesting to know what we think we need to spend more money on, especially given that there have already been 3 other mayoral authorities that have already gone through this process and might be able to pass on that knowledge that apparently we don't have in-house. And then the second thing is page 198, 2.3, it talks about the success of our bus alliance. I'd love to know how we define success, because all that we've had for, as far as I can remember, is frustration that our bus operators don't seem to want to respond to local needs, with the biggest example being about Transport for the North and their refusal to join into contactless charging. And what do we think is the likelihood of the Urban Transport Group proposal of achieving success with the government in terms of what they ask for in terms of powers for bus services? And can we just confirm that this is a consensus in terms of powers that we're asking from government, from all of the elected mayors, no matter what party they're representing?
Thanks, Councillor Galton. Just to reassure you that also I know Councillor Groves has been in active dialogue with all the mayoral combined authorities regarding buses and how they're working on their options and plans. So it's not for want of obviously dialogue. Councillor Groves, did you want to come in on that first before I go on to Dave Pearson?
Yeah, absolutely. We work with Liverpool and Manchester, and we've been able, probably will be able to save funding going forward because of the lessons learned in terms of bringing the right expertise into the Combined Authority. We sometimes do use consultants, and it would be better to have those people in-house and trained up. And obviously, in terms of transport, we probably need to buy in the legal services because, like I said, you've got to have the 78 million initial cost set up, and Manchester and Liverpool have still not delivered franchising yet. So they're still going through this process, and that's 3 years down the line. In terms of, and now let Dave Pearson come in on this, in terms of the alliance, certainly I think over the last 2 years we've had the biggest investment on clean technology in the country. I think it's either 50 or 70% of buses have either been retrofitted or new capital investment into new buses, and we've got the electric buses coming on screen. We've got the Young People's Fair that we've managed to negotiate, and we've got another announcement going forward in October, which, like I said, saw a 41% increase. We don't have any other model to work with because, like you said, for me, on the ground, people want a reliable and affordable service. But we also need a service that serves those routes that are on the arterial network, where people are more socially isolated, and places like Calderdale and Wakefield areas may only have one service an hour, and actually if we were actually running the services, you would want to service all those areas. It can't be right that actually we can't get transport to an employment zone just outside Leeds where there was 1,000 vacancies. So we need to be working on all those things, and to actually get that model right, we have to do this work and put that model forward to government. A government roundtable conversation was held with Andrew Gilligan, who is recognising that actually there needs to be a different model, and that's the work we're doing. And I'll just bring in Dave Pearson, Councillor Hitchcliffe.
Yep, Dave.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Groves. In terms of the skills, and do we have the skills in-house, then we've got a lot of knowledge in-house in terms of bus services and transport. What we do need to bring into this is that this is a fairly complex legal process, and we also need business advice in terms of where the respective bus companies are and where the bus market is. We do need some specialist business and accountancy advice to be able to navigate through this fairly careful situation that we find ourselves in, because when the government emergency funding ends for bus services, then the bus industry is going to be in a very different place, and we need to be able to navigate the Combined Authority's position through that. And we do need some specialist expertise alongside the expertise we have in-house. Councillor Galton mentioned the Bus Alliance, and I think what the Bus Alliance is doing is creating a level of collaboration on the ground between bus operators and the Combined Authority, but it's probably not fulfilling the requirements of the bus strategy, the patronage growth, the general sort of uplift that we're seeking to see. And to a certain extent, that's what this paper's identifying, is that on its own, the Bus Alliance is helping. We would be in a worse place if we didn't have it, in terms of our collaboration with bus operators, particularly over the last 4 months, when we've all worked together on a very difficult situation. But what I think this is saying is that we need something more substantial, perhaps, in the Bus Alliance, and we do need to explore the options that emerge. Because, as Councillor Groves has said, the government themselves are looking at the different models for bus services as well. We need to be well placed for that. So I think that's broadly where we are with both those things. The final point, I think, was, are we learning lessons from Liverpool and Manchester? I mean, we've got active engagement with the advisors that are particularly advising Manchester at the moment. They're telling us about the process that Manchester's going through in its bus reform process, and what the legal process is for the Combined Authority in West Yorkshire to go through that. And within that is this clear need for specialist legal advice. This is a fairly new charter territory for all of the authorities. We may be a little bit behind Manchester and Liverpool. We may be a fair bit behind Manchester, but we're still sort of working our way through. I think the final point that Councillor Galton made was the proposal that Councillor Blake and the Metro Mayors, acting through the Urban Transport Group, have made to government on a funding model. Short answer is we really don't know. I think, as we say in the paper, that the current bus funding package comes to an end a week tomorrow, and we're expecting something from the government this week as to what the emergency funding package for bus is going to be going forward. We don't expect it to end a week tomorrow, but it's quite frustrating that it's almost a week away and we still don't know. But what we will be told is what consideration to that proposition that was made. We'll find out possibly in the next couple of days. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, keep watching the news. Councillor Pandor, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Firstly, I welcome the report. I think it's going in the right direction. We're talking about public funds and taxpayers' money. This is something that we talk about all the time. Just to reflect back, before COVID and the pandemic, we already know that there was massive issues, not just in our bus infrastructure and bus service, but also on our rail infrastructure. And we've discussed that many a time, but I'm not going to focus on the rail. This is about buses. Since March, the issue has been magnified, and we've seen that the system just can't work. The market volatility is so great that even before COVID, right, yeah, the market was very, very volatile, and we were basically propping up a service at the expense of taxpayers. So from my point of view, the market failed. This is market failure, a typical example of that. I think Councillor Kim Rose mentioned the key words for me: reliability and affordability. Not at the expense of the public forking out billions of pounds nationally in profits to actually, you know, carry the way private companies operate. And I understand that is their motive. Private companies, their motive is making profits. Public services, their motive is to provide a service. And I think, you know, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge. You know, this 150k will fund some of the legal and the specialist, you know, people, professionals to carry out that full feasibility study. But from my point of view, you know, this is a no-brainer for me. This is music to my ears. This is something that I've been waiting for years and years and years. And I think it's an opportunity. Lessons need to be learned. It was mentioned earlier on, lessons have been learned, and lessons will continue to be learned. And I think we need to take every opportunity to maximise whatever legislation we have, whatever tool we have at our disposal, to actually make sure that we take control back of our buses. Again, Councillor Kim Grove mentioned a really, really important point. Employment zones, we're trying to get people to get out to work, and if they have not got no public transport to take them there, then you failed. And I'd go further. And again, I've mentioned this a number of times. The Public Health England report has highlighted key areas of inequalities: poverty, deprivation, ethnicity, overcrowding, you know, you name it. All the socio-economic indicators across all 5 authorities, where we represent people who are trying to make a living, trying to get on the economic ladder. This is an opportunity that we can actually add to that toolbox to make sure that we give people a real opportunity, a real start in life, and let's get on with this feasibility study, and let's get the ball rolling. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Which sounds like to me a good way of proposing the item. So can I just say all those in favour of this item, please show. And can it be noted, Councillor Blake has had to pop out, but she wanted to also indicate her support for this item. So thank you very much. That is carried, everybody. Thank you very much. Moving on now to the next item on the agenda. Can I just remind everybody there's 4 more items left on the agenda, one of which is carbon emissions policy, and we've only got 25 minutes. So can I ask everybody to keep their questions and answers quite brief, please, in this? So moving on now to West Yorkshire carbon emission reduction pathways. Can I first of all thank officers for all the work they've done on this? There's some excellent work and detailed work on the background to show exactly what we need to do to get where we want to be in 2038 and make significant progress by 2030. Alan would like to say something on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, though taking your steer to keep it brief. So just to introduce as well for answering any detailed questions on this. So I've got Noel Collings from the policy team, and then Antonia and Catherine are joining us as well, who are the consultants from Element Energy who have carried out the work for us. Essentially what we're asking for here is for endorsement of the progress so far, and then to go out to consult with stakeholders. And Appendix 4 is a draft survey that we would propose to issue for that conversation with stakeholders, which is essentially asking for feedback about how we should then go about implementing the recommendations that are in the report. There is a more detailed technical report, which we have also published on our website, which goes into more detail. Essentially, what this report sets out is following the declaration of the climate emergency and there's net zero carbon target for 2038, is it sets out what needs to happen in order to enable that target to be met across various sectors, including transport and energy and industry. It acknowledges that there are some national decisions which need to be taken by government in time, which might affect how we do it. The biggest one of which is the role of hydrogen and the way in which heat will be delivered. And that essentially means that a final decision about the pathway to be taken should not yet be made. That said, there are a number of common actions which apply to all the pathways, which we would suggest should be pursued, and those are set out in the report. As I mentioned earlier, there is a crossover here with various other things, such as how we are delivering our transport and economic recovery. Huge potential here for job creation, and that was one of the things that was discussed when this material went to both the Green Economy Panel and the LET board. So as you said, this is a very substantial piece of work. It requires changes in national policy. It requires investment from government. It requires action regionally and locally, and it requires a large amount of behaviour change, frankly, from people in order to deliver it. So with that, I'll stop there. But myself or the team that I introduced, happy to try and answer any questions that people may have.
Thank you. So any comments or questions on this? Obviously a hugely significant piece of work. We've been waiting for this for a while they work out all the numbers and what the accurate steps are that we need to make to achieve our ambitions. Councillor Pennington, you're indicating.
Thank you, Leader. I'm just reading through the documents all the way through, and we're saying things like quantifiable methodology assessments must be made. We need evidence that all schemes will reduce carbon emissions, both directly and indirectly. We're making great inroads to enhance the quality of life for West Yorkshire residents. Have we taken into account the elephant in the room, LBA?
Noel, would you like to answer that?
Yeah. So the
Alan, I said Noel. It was Noel's moment.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said Alan.
No, I said
Apologies.
Noel.
Absolutely. So Leeds Bradford Airport is considered within the report itself, and the work that has been done, both from the point of view of the proposal that is on the table from LBA to increase passenger numbers, but also what the current level of passenger numbers does to the emissions profile of the city region. West Yorkshire.
Big message is cars, actually, John. We need to get out of our cars, I'm afraid. And in the current time, it's when government is indicating that we need to get in our cars, it's not really helpful for our climate emergency.
Can I just come back on that one? Because we're making a nice statement there, but we're not getting an answer.
But
what's the outcome then?
It's in the paper, John, about LBA, about what the contribution is. I think it was, there was a percentage in there, wasn't there, Noel?
It's the lowest one, but it increases over time.
Yes, so there are a number of percentages in the paper which cover off the contribution of Leeds Bradford Airport. It is, as Councillor Hinchcliffe has stated, quite a small proportion of the footprint of the city region. Road transport is a greater element of that. You are talking about it being, and I'm sure Antonio will correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere in the region of about 8% of our transport emissions at this current time. So it's quite a small proportion of that.
Thank you. Councillor Galton, again, can you keep the question brief, please? Thank you.
I'm back. I was having a look at the paper on web.gov, so I'm afraid it's a bit disjointed. Yes, the aviation issue. One of the things I liked about this paper was it was very good at articulating what quantum was needed to be achieved in different areas. But it's all about delivery, really, isn't it? And I found it very difficult to understand how the combined authority would be accountable for delivery, or whether local authorities would be accountable for delivery on the combined authority's behalf, or whether or not anything was actually going to get measured, and whether this was just a vision statement. So I really do think we need to do a lot of work from now on to identify who has responsibility for what. And the question of Leeds Bradford Airport, of course, comes up because it is a transport asset which is shared by the population of not just this sub-region, but region as well. And in terms of responsibilities to respond, then we all have responsibility. So in terms of reducing, for instance, that domestic air travel by 20%, which is listed in this paper, and keeping international travel at 2020 levels or controlled, we need to invest in other areas to compensate for that, so that people can actually still get around and we still have our tourist economy. So it's all about who is actually going to respond to the actions that we imply need to be taken here, and I think that will be something that should be worked up after this paper.
Thank you, Councillor Galton. Certainly the mechanics of it, if they're not clear, need to be clearer, but how I see it from Bradford point of view is that West Yorkshire Combined Authority connects all of us in this effort, because we can't achieve zero carbon emissions on our own in just one area. As you just indicated there, it goes across the whole region, doesn't it? But carbon emissions don't know boundaries of local authorities, and neither do they know the region either. I would call on government to make sure they get a national aviation strategy out there, for example, because we, just by the same token, we can't plan for one airport and not for the other at the other side of the Pennines, which obviously a lot of residents in West Yorkshire drive over the M62 to every day to get to that airport, because the connectivity isn't good enough on the train. And actually they don't have the same flights here in Leeds Bradford. So it's a much bigger picture than anything we can do independently here in West Yorkshire. This is a combined effort of the local authorities, but also of the whole country, and tackling this really urgent item. So I've got to anybody else indicating. Councillor Lee, can you keep it short? I'm sorry to be really bossy, but can you keep your question short, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will. I've already mentioned the basic assumptions lying behind these various projects and objectives. And, the aviation industry is in a terrible mess right now. Gatwick's in danger of closing completely because of withdrawal of services. So I would question 7 million extra passengers at Leeds Bradford. I would hope that it's achievable, but is it? And the other thing, and I think in Appendix 3, referring to walking and cycling, I think they're encouraging 80% more walking, but if I've got this right, is it 20 times more cycling? Because are these figures actually achievable? And as somebody else has said, I think they're aspirational rather than achievable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd just say, Councillor Lee, we have to have ambition for our region. This is not the time to reduce that ambition when it comes to switching from the car. Having the car is just not a sustainable way of going forward, not just for climate emergency, but also for clean air, I'd have to say. I've not got anybody else indicating. I'd just ask Alan probably just to sweep up those very briefly before we go on to the next item.
I think it's probably the way you've summarised it just then. So what this work is about is setting out what needs to be done. The next stage is then how, and clearly some of the figures in here are very ambitious, and they will take time. We have seen through things like the Transforming Cities Fund, very substantial investment in cycling and walking. We have seen through City Connect very large scale campaigns that have driven behaviour change to try and get people to cycle and walk more. The COVID crisis has undoubtedly made some of this harder, because it has reversed some of that behaviour and got people some behaviour where people have moved from public transport into cars. However, what we have seen is also an increase in cycling and walking and other forms of active travel, and we want to try and capture some of that. But the comments are well taken on how does this then go into operation, how does it get delivered, and that's part of the next stage of the the work.
Okay, thank you, Alan, for that. So finally, I just call on government to come up with make some key decisions that we need them to make, so that we can choose which pathway we go on next with this work. So they need to make a decision about their national aviation strategy. They also need to make a decision about, is it hydrogen, is it electric, which way they're going to go. So some of those major decisions, which don't cost them money, but just give us some certainty about what the future framework is within which you're operating, that was really needed at this moment. So I'd ask them to accelerate the decision making on some of those things. So with that, can I see all those in favour of next steps on this paper, please show. Thank you, that is carried. We will therefore move on with that work, very important piece of work, and please, I want to involve as wide a number of stakeholders as possible in that work so we get it, because it is all our responsibility. Going back to Councillor Galton's point, it's not just the Combined Authority, it's not just local authority leaders, it's everybody. So we all need to embrace it and to take our own responsibility seriously in our own lives and our own businesses. So moving on now to the next item on the agenda, which is budgets. We've alluded to this earlier. Angela, could you just briefly tell us about the budget? Obviously, it's in the paper. Things are...
I will. Yeah, I will, thank you, and try to focus on the decisions that are asked for in the report. So there's information there about the current budget position and the impact of COVID on our budget. You've heard before that there are still a lot of unanswered questions and uncertainty, particularly around bus funding. Additionally, we've been asking government for support on some of our losses, and there has been some slight movement in that we've recently heard that some of the relief available to local authorities on sales and fees and charges is also to be extended to combined authorities. So we're working through what that means for the figures we've got. The proposal here is we will come back to the meeting in September with a more definitive position, because the bus funding issue that you've already covered before is critical to our budget process here. However, the paper also goes on to set out the twin challenges of continuing to deliver at pace in the current climate, and the need for us to deliver on devolution to what are very tight timescales, and involving also now the PCC transfer. We do need additional resource to make that happen successfully, and asking here that we commit some further funding to be underwritten by the gain share that we expect to come through in the new year. Also a commitment to funding the transforming cities. You'll recall we had the ambition to deliver a higher scenario. We had a well thought out programme for that higher scenario, but we only got funding for the lower scenario. We're proposing here that we work towards using gain share to top up that position, so that we can actually deliver the full extent of the Transforming Cities programme that we all regionally wanted to deliver. So the specific recommendations asked for here are to note the budget position. It's suggested we go back to a budget working group over the summer to go through it in more detail and come back then in the autumn. And then 2 approvals about the use of future gain share for the transition costs and for the higher scenario of transforming cities.
Thank you very much. Obviously, it sounded from earlier in the conversation that 4th of August is a significant date for us to see if that helps with our bus services and the funding for them. So we wait to see what that is. Councillor Galton, is that an old blue hand or is that a new blue hand? Old. So you're all right then. So I won't bring you in. Anybody else has anything to say on the budget? No. Okay. Well, suffice it to say that obviously the budget is very stretched. We need to make sure that we've written to government and told them as Combined Authority we're sustaining funding on buses that we shouldn't really have to do in this time. There is a response nationally to be made on buses that we need to see some benefit from. We had a balanced budget in February, we don't now, and that is obviously a very pressing issue for us. We have a great opportunity come next year to have this additional funding on capital expenditure, but we need to get through this year as well. So let's all take that seriously. So with that, can I see those in favour of the budget paper? Please show recommendations. Thank you very much. That is carried. Next item on the agenda is pension transfer. This has been negotiated it for quite some years, hasn't it, this actually, Angela? I'm pleased to see it coming here finally. Obviously it needs resolving. Angela, do you want to briefly tell members what it's about?
Yes, there's a strange throwback to the past, but it is an obligation that has been passed from predecessor organisations, the Combined Authority. You're quite right, we brought it some time ago for a decision which you duly made, but unfortunately the other parties involved in this, in the form of First Group, were not comfortable with the arrangement and we've had to go back again. So there's a proposal here where we are asking you to approve the transfer of a portion of assets from our pension fund to Greater Manchester Pension Fund. This funds then some of our liability about pension increases to former drivers that are now employed by First Group. First Group have set this work off. They want to put all their pensions in one place. It has precipitated us having to respond. We have spent some considerable time and effort to find a way of doing this that allows us to meet our obligations, but does not involve us incurring additional costs. The approach in this paper is supported by West Yorkshire Pension Fund, by the actuaries of the pension fund, by our actuaries, and by us. And we are proposing this to you, to members today. Hopefully the paper makes sense. Ultimately, it is about having to join the Greater Manchester Pension Fund solely to look after those bits of assets that will pay out this liability. The assets we fully believe should be sufficient to meet that. There will not be an additional cost falling to existing pension payments to make good any difference. It is simply separating out what's been in effect treated as two separate pension pots under West Yorkshire Combined Authority name.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to take questions. It does get into some complex pension issues,
Okay,
but it's, as I say, approved by all parties as a sensible way forward.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this item? No, it is something that we've been briefed on previously, Angela, so we are cited on it. And obviously, from our administrative point of view, it needs to happen. So can I propose all those in favour, please show? That is carried. Thank you very much. So moving on finally to the last item on the agenda, which is governance. And that's when Councillor Stephen Lee gets put on governance and audit. And that's well deserved, Councillor Lee. I shall see you on Thursday at governance and audit. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Is there anything else you need to go through on this paper?
Thank you. I think some of it is hopefully straightforward, an update on corporate plan for the old year, an update on the risk management arrangements, which will also go to governance and audit this week, highlighting where we have focused in on additional risk arising as a result of both COVID-19 and our work to become Mayoral ready. We have redone our business plans for the year. So you had seen these earlier in the year, but then along came COVID and we got devolution over the line. So we have done a revision to the business plans, which are set out in Appendix 2, along with the text for this year's corporate plan. And we're asking your approval to the contents of those, so we can take those forward to finalise them. There'll be some final tidying up of the corporate plan. But if there's a request there for that to be delegated to the Managing Director in consultation with the chairs to finalise what that looks like. And the Chair has referenced the request for the appointment for Councillor Lee for Governance and Audit Committee.
Lovely, thank you very much. So any questions or comments on those recommendations? No? Can I see all those in favour, please show? Thank you, that is carried. I think there's some minutes for noting everything at the back of this agenda, but otherwise, have we completed everything, Angela, now, and Ruth?
We have, thank you.
Lovely. Well, can I say thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance this morning. There's been quite a lot to go through there, and I will see you at the next meeting. All the best. Bye-bye.